Hi, tonight's presentation is on avoiding gear up landings and gear collapses. I had a twofold reason for presenting this one this evening. Um, uh, Dave Novotny had sent out a AOPA safety YouTube on gear up landings, and this is somewhat loosely based on that. Because he thought that was appropriate, seeing how 9.6 Charlie is back online and a lot of people are getting checked out in it. When I got that, I thought that was uh, probably a good idea, and so I thought I could put it into something a little more narrative than watching that YouTube. And I made it a little more personal, adding things for 9.6 Charlie, that the YouTube was a little more general. So I'm getting my, there it is, okay. Trying to get my stylus here. I had mentioned earlier, well, in January, that I asked Gina from the FAST team to give me the first quarter data accident reports. And the accident reports will somewhat fold into a little bit this presentation on gear up landings. So she sent me just a few statistics in slide form here, which I put in here. And their data collection sources from the SAS and the ATQA, FAA safety team rep reports, and 8020-23 FAA accident incident reports. What this is first quarter analysis, and I think 2022 is on the left here. And so the first quarter of 2022 is here. The first quarter of 23 is here. First quarter of 22 is here. First quarter of 21. First quarter of 20. This army green color is the accidents, and the blue is the incidents. So from first quarter 2020 on down, as you can see, they went up and down, and looks like the accidents have staying about the same, where the incidents went up the first quarter of this year. And the locations that these came from were simply these two, which was Colorado Springs and Fort Morgan. When you look at the primary cause factors, of course, pilot-induced error is always the highest on the list. Gear collapse is down there with loss of control, loss of power, running out of fuel, and bird strikes. So pilot-induced error, we're going to talk about a little bit because of generally that phase of flight. And pilot-induced error is on approach to landing. So you have approach, rollout, and touchdown is where the highest count is on the incident and accident report for this quarter. So that kind of dovetails into this presentation on the gear up landings. Now, from the AOPA presentation, they said that 75% of gear up landings are pilot induced, which includes belly landings, gear failures, and gear collapses. And of course, as I previously mentioned, 9.6 Charlie is back on the flight line. Most of these accidents are preventable, and pilots can have the greatest impact on the rate of occurrence. Insurance providers say they average 2 gear up claims per week. I didn't know that. How can we as pilots avoid becoming a gear up landing statistic? Well, 3 things here: minimize flight distractions, use checklists, check and verify. Minimize flight distractions. Sterile cockpit, especially on approach to landing, is very important. And in the teaching environment, not always the easiest place to keep that sterile, and can be and usually is where that happens. In the flight training scenario, those of you that are not training in this and are just out flying can perform a sterile cockpit environment as soon as you get into the traffic pattern. Using the checklist, of course, is paramount, and it just can't be avoided and shouldn't be. Check and verify. Just putting the gear lever down does not mean the gear is down. You need to either look out the window, look at the mirror on the right-hand passenger side wing to see that all the gear's down. You will feel it when it clunks down. You would check the gear lever, you would check the light. You need to verify by at least 2 other things that you have the gear down. And on a high wing, there's no excuse for not looking out the window. Getting set up is one of the most important things, and getting established on a stabilized approach is like a whole nother presentation. But simply put, on speed, on altitude, and runway alignment. As far as speed goes, this is right from the POH of the 96 Charlie. Airspeed 70 to 80 with flaps up. Flaps as desired, 0 to 10 below 140, 10 to 40 below 95 indicated, knots indicated. Airspeed here with 40 degrees of flaps should be at 70, which is a better speed, especially for rental planes. I always like to say, well, Ernie Gahn's comment in Fate is a Hunter, he said, well, that's when you sit up straight and take the gum out of your mouth and put down the magazine. But in this case, I guess put down your telephone, which is a good idea. Adjusting trim, main wheels first, lower nose wheel gently on the landing roll, braking minimum required. Now, the techniques for landing this airplane, of course, are well outlined by any checkout instructor. Of once the wheel has gently touched down on the pavement, the nose wheel, then you would make sure you have a forward moved yoke so that you make sure it's down. And then, of course, minimum braking, and there are no touch and goes, no roll goes, on the goes. It's a stop and go, which is cleared for the option in this plane. You have trouble slowing down, maybe the gear may still be up, which is something to think about. 2696 Charlie, and most retracts do have an oral gear warning buzzer at low manifold pressure if the gear is up, which means, the throttle, I don't know, it's an adjustable thing, but commonly it's around 10 to 11 inches. It's just a mechanical adjustment, so it's maybe the last quarter of the travel, maybe the last 3/8 of an inch of the travel, or a ½ inch of the throttle. Cable just depends. That's where that little micro switch is. It's right on the throttle cable, right under the dash there. It also has an oral gear warning buzzer at high flap settings of over 20 degrees with the gear up. So if you put in, 30 degrees flaps, you're going to hear the same buzzer. It's the same buzzer. A good way, for when you have people in the plane with you is to inform passengers what to look for to help you out. Gear position lights, which are down here under the yoke, and you can't really see them in this picture. Visual inspection, which is looking out the window. Hey, do you see a gear over there? Can you look out the window and look at the mirror on the passenger side? Do you see all 3 gear down? And the gear switch positions, which is over here. Flaps, of course, is right here. And again, at 500 AGL and lower, which is going to be when you're on short, when you're on final. And if you find out that the gear is still up, it's recommended to go around. Gear may not have enough time to extend fully. Full extension is 5 seconds, more or less, more probably. Hold nose wheel off the ground and land on the main wheels only. I'm reiterating this from an earlier slide. Prevent undue loads on the nose gear and chance of gear collapse or prop strike. And this is very important when you're checked out in the airplane, that you would be told, again, no touch and goes, only full stop on the runway and then go. Do not reconfigure the airplane until either off the runway and have come to a complete stop on your taxi turnoff, or if you are getting a stop and go to sit on the runway and do that. It has to be a complete stop. Then go through the checklist completely from the POH for 182 RG. After landing, wing flaps up, carburetor heat, cold. I got a couple double numbers here. And cowl flaps open. Now we're going into, well, there's 3 issues here. Troubleshooting at a safe altitude if the gear fails to extend. Follow emergency gear extension checklist. Follow emergency checklist for gear up landing. Now, these are right from the POH for 182 and are not in that AOPA video. And while I don't want to spend a lot of time on these, I think it's important that you should spend time on these before the checkout or when you're flying it after the checkout. These are fairly extensive. I mean, especially this one. So let's just look at these real quick. The gear fails to extend. Troubleshoot at a safe altitude. Landing gear malfunction procedures right from the POH troubleshooting. In the event of possible gear retraction or extension malfunctions, there are several general checks that should be made prior to initiating the steps outlined in the following paragraphs. There is quite a few things here that you really don't want to be reading for the first time if this happens. In analyzing a landing gear malfunction, first check that the master is on, the landing gear and gear pump circuit breakers are in, reset if necessary. Also check both landing gear position indicator lights for operation by pressing to test the light units and rotating them at the same time to check for open dimming shutters. A burned out bulb can be replaced in flight by using the bulb from the remaining gear position indicator light. Of course, in your case, you know, with all this, that's true, but yes, looking at those are those switches that you should be looking at before you fly the airplane that are up in the wheel well. Retraction malfunctions. If the landing gear fails to retract normally or an intermittent gear up indicator light is present, check the indicator light for proper operation and attempt to recycle the landing gear. Place the landing up. This is landing gear lever, should say, in the gear down position. When the gear down light illuminates, reposition the gear lever in the gear up position for another retraction attempt. If the gear up indicator light still fails to illuminate, the flight may be continued to an airport having maintenance facilities. You can see that continuing to read this is a lot of stuff to read while you're flying around in a circle trying to figure out why this thing isn't working. So doing that at altitude is a great idea. Not continuing the approach. Asking to leave the pattern is a great idea. Let's try and sort it out. Flying around in the pattern at Colorado Springs so they can keep an eye on you isn't necessarily a good idea, I wouldn't think, because if the plane's flying and the plane is flying, the gear just doesn't come down. It really doesn't have anything to do with anything else. So instead of me reading all this, I think my point was there's a lot of stuff in the POH on this, which it does. I think it is good. It behooves you to read this first. The second one was emergency gear extension list. Not very big deal. Something that you should practice in your checkout. Landing gear lever needs to be down. Emergency handle pump, extend handle and pump perpendicular to handle until perpendicular means up, means like, well, I can't do it in the, I'm trying to say like this way, not this way. Okay. Extend the handle, pump perpendicular handle until resistance becomes heavy, about 20 cycles. Gear down light should be on, pump handle stow, which means untelescope it. Emergency gear up landing checklist. So the gear, that didn't work. So now you are committed and you do have to land the airplane. So now you have this other list. So you see there's quite a few things here that are good to practice and read over and chair fly before you take the airplane with a lot of people in it going somewhere. It is a good idea. I mean, it's a retractable gear airplane. You know, the more mechanics there are, the more there are. I don't know why in small airplanes it's like that, but I've had probably I've had 2 issues teaching in Cessnas, and I've had 3 in my plane where the thing just, the motor burns up, the fuse keeps popping, the thing just won't go down. You know, it happens. So I don't know. So you have this whole list here. And so again, this is right from the POH. From that AOPA YouTube, there's some interesting things brought up by that presenter. He said keep the engine running. I guess the common knowledge that was talked about was that it is unlikely you'll be able to avoid a prop strike by diverting your attention to get that prop to be perfectly parallel with the ground, you know, and so that's a dangerous thing. They said that it's statistically unlikely there would be a fire, and I suppose part of the checklist from the previous slide is once you land, you turn off all the fuel. I suppose if there's a crash landing, and you got full fuel, there's always a chance of fuel, but a gear up landing done correctly is not a crash. Generally won't destroy the airframe, generally. Running an engine helps to slow aircraft with drag. Running the engine produces oil pressure for prop pitch management and also gives you power in case of go around. And a more familiar scenario for normal landing. I would say on these 4 just real quick that if, shutting the engine off and shutting all the, I mean, if you had an engine fire, I guess you would have to do that. Then you have that problem, and that's a real compound problem. This one, first of all, that prop's going to go to flat pitch, which means that thing's going to drop like a piano or a washing machine or something, and you don't have a lot of, that's a whole different, that's like 2 problems now, and you probably won't make the runway if you aren't real close. And so keeping the engine running, at least you can go around if you get too upset and it didn't work right, and so I'm with them keeping the engine going. And it's, landing on the pavement rather than the dirt. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, they think it can stop abruptly in the dirt and possibly flip over is what this says behind my head. And a better access for emergency vehicles. So I thought that was very helpful. More info can be found on the FAA Airplane Flying Handbook, Chapter 17 on emergency procedures. So if you do get checked out in that, I hope you have it's a great plane, and there's so many other things on that you will learn on the checkout. But as far as trying to avoid gear up landings, which as Dave pointed out in his email, he has seen, I think he said 3 or 4. I know of 3, and all those people are still here. So, but that stuff happens. So, okay, so now they're going to have the drawing, and that's the end of the safety presentation. Thanks.